Señoras y señores, seguimos con las entrevistas del foro Hablamos Alliance, el foro que reúne a los mejores economistas de Latinoamérica. Y hoy entrevistamos a vaya una personalidad, Deirdre McCloskey, una figura única en el mundo de la economía. Pero antes de ver la entrevista, agradecemos al Centro Ricardo Salinas Pliego por la invitación a este evento. Deirdre McCloskey es una economista e historiadora transexual, considerada una de las académicas con mayor renombre en los Estados Unidos. Es egresada de la Universidad de Harvard, cuenta con 6 doctorados honoris causa. Sus estudios se enfocan en la historia de la economía moderna, el capitalismo y la estadística. McCloskey se ha convertido en una de las voces más fuertes en pro de los derechos de la comunidad LGBT. En esta entrevista hablamos de su visión de la desigualdad, de lo que significa ser una mujer trans en el mundo moderno y de cómo ha llevado sus finanzas cuando era hombre y ahora como mujer. Gente, consideren que esta entrevista está hecha en inglés. Si quieren ver los subtítulos, váyanse a mi canal de YouTube. Y antes de empezar la entrevista, escúchenme bien. Emprendedores que venden por redes sociales ya no tienen de qué preocuparse. Porque con el link de pago de Mercado Pago puedes hacer tus cobros de una manera fácil y segura. Solamente crea un link de pago con el nombre del producto y su precio. Envíalo por WhatsApp a tus clientes y ellos podrán pagar con cualquier tarjeta y hasta meses. Recibe el dinero al instante y seguro, ya que si llega a haber algún problema, ellos lo resuelven, mantienen seguro el dinero y visible en tu cuenta. Así que ya sabes, no batalles más con tus cuentas. Utiliza el link de pago de Mercado Pago.
Deirdre, it's very a pleasure to have you here. Let's talk about growth at first. Economic situation around the world is very particular, especially after COVID. And it's shifting very interesting. What's the position of the Northern America, especially Canada, United States, and Mexico in growth terms?
Well, look, in the long run, Mexico is going to become as rich as the United States.
Okay.
I have no doubt about that. There's nothing about Mexicans that they're stupid and they're never going to get to be as good as we Yankees. After all, here you are speaking my language. I can't speak yours.
Okay.
You know the joke? Person who knows 3 languages is called trilingual.
Yeah.
Someone who knows 2 is called bilingual. Someone who knows 1 is called una gringa.
Una gringa.
So, in the very long run, in a couple of generations, maybe 3, Mexico's going to be just fine. In the meantime, it's got a lot of policy problems, but so does my country. But the future is bright for the world. On the other hand, we can stop it if we want with war, or with nationalism or socialism.
What has to happen for Mexico to reach this potential you're talking about?
Well, you have to not make the big mistakes. The big mistakes, as I said, are nationalism and socialism. If you like nationalism and socialism, maybe you like National Socialism, like the Nazi Party in Germany. No, excessive nationalism leads to protectionism. We're going to be self-sufficient in gasoline and in petrol. I mean, that's silly. We're going to have tariffs. The Trump administration introduced tariffs against Mexican steel. This is loco. And so nationalism is a problem, so is socialism. So the idea of socialism is magic. We're not going to we're going to give to poor people, and they're going to keep on working miraculously if we give money to them, and we're going to take it from those bad, very rich people, and it's not going to hurt any of you in the middle. And that's nonsense. It's crazy.
What do you think about regulation, especially?
That's the big problem. Look, the share of government expenditure, both for transfers and for buying stuff in Mexico as a share of national income is not like France, where it's 57%. But in Mexico, as in France, as in the United States, the reach of the government is much bigger because of regulation. Even regulation, I'll take a kind of crazy example. In the United States, there's regulation of how you raise your children. Here's an example. When I was a child, my mother would say on Saturday, go out to play. Come back when the street lights turn on.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
If you want to come for lunch, okay, but anyway, just go out and play. You can't do that anymore in the United States. It's against the law. If you do that, the state will come and take your children away from you.
If you're playing with the street lights on.
If you send the kids out to play, according to the government, children have to be supervised by adults all the time.
All the time.
Well, you know, this is bad for the children. They don't learn how to get along with other children. And it's an interference. So that's just one example of thousands of intervention by the government.
And what do you think about regulation and intervention to protect some practices in the free market that could be harmful for the economy?
Well, there is a widespread belief in the last 100 years among economists that the private market is very imperfect.
Imperfect.
Monopoly, externality, informational asymmetry, all kinds of things are supposed to be true. Well, this, of course, gives economists lots to do.
Yeah,
we get to regulate your life because, you're imperfect. I'm going to fix you.
Yeah.
I'm from economics, and I'm going to help you. Well, the scientific problem is that these imperfections that economists talk about, it's not that they don't exist at all. That's a simple way of putting it, and that would be silly. Yes, there's enterprise monopoly, a little bit. And yes, there are externalities, smoke, whatever, right? Yes. But their magnitude, first, has never been established as big scientifically. And the cure is supposed to be we'll bring in the wise government
to regulate,
advised by economists, and that'll take care of it.
Yeah.
And neither of those are scientifically proven.
Okay.
So there's an awful lot of, I don't know what you'd call it, just silliness in the minds of economists. And we've got to regulate, we've got to, there are all these terrible things, these terrible, scary things, enterprise monopoly.
Taking, for example, the 2008 crisis.
Yeah.
For example, and the role of regulation and deregulation in this situation. What's your take on it?
Well, there was a lot of foolish encouragement to poor people buying houses that they couldn't afford. My brother was poor at the time. He's still kind of poor, but not too much. But he was poor at the time. And about 2 years before the crisis, he was able to buy a house to get a mortgage with very little income.
No upfront.
No upfront. Zero upfront. And, I'm an economist, economic historian. I should have said, oops, John got a mortgage. There's something wrong here, but I didn't. So it was very foolish. So what we did is my mother and sister and I bought the house for him so he could keep it. And that's where he still lives. But, there was a lot of distortion caused by the government. And by the way, another of the regulations that governments do are monetary policy and fiscal policy, we call it in economics, namely what you do with the banks and the money supply on the one hand, and what you do with taxes and expenditure on the other. Neither of those should be responsibilities of government. The government shouldn't run the money supply. And government taxes shouldn't be trying to stabilize the economy. They should be for paying real public goods. That's another one of the imperfections. We got to pay for public goods. Well, there are a few public goods that government should do. The government of Mexico should defeat the cartels, number one. The other public good that we should do north of the border is abolish the war on drugs. which would then defeat the cartels in Mexico. I mean, come on. Those policies, macro policies, not the micro policies, but the macro, the big ones, they're illegitimate too.
Illegitimate.
They're not, well, that's an incorrect word to use, because that means against the law. Yeah. And they're not against the law, unfortunately, but they're unwise. We should leave the economy alone, and we should leave Mexicans alone to prosper and to open businesses and to move to different parts of the country.
What's your take on the situation of women in today's economy?
Well, it's much improved, and this is really important to know, and people know it, but they forget it. They tend to forget it, particularly young women. It's much better than it once was. My mother, in the 1950s, could not have a bank account on her own. If she got money and went to the bank would say, no, you have to get the permission of your husband.
Of your husband.
And by the way, her husband, my father, it's a kind of a tricky situation, but before he died, he got a second mortgage on the house we were not quite sure what he did with it, paid gambling debts or something. We don't know what he did. And he forged her signature.
Forged her signature?
Forged her signature, because they owned it jointly. Yeah. So, this was a bad situation. Now it's much better. More women work. And that gives them independence. But it always has. In the way old days, you'd go from being the daughter to being the wife. Was nothing in between. Yeah. Whereas when there got to be factories in which women could work, they had a period between being a daughter and being a wife where they were earning their own money. And this gave them independence. They didn't have to get married, for one thing. So anyway, there's a great improvement. There's a lot more to be done.
Do you think there's a glass ceiling?
Yeah, there's a glass ceiling, and you see it all over the place. You take a look at corporate boards in Mexico, and take a look, how many women? And it's true in the United States, too.
It's true in the United States.
Oh, yeah, you bet it is. I'm not sure the solution is a government solution. I'm a great believer in inner revolution instead of outer revolution. Okay. Inner revolution being that you persuade people that women are equal. Okay. And that has changed considerably, because when I was a child, women were not considered equal. Now, much more they are. Yeah.
On popular culture.
In popular culture. I find it very hard to watch movies, American movies from the 1950s. From the 30s, it isn't bad, but in the 50s, all the women are very weak, and the men are saving them, and they're just there for decoration. And that's not true of modern movies.
And what do you think about income inequality? Is it?
Well, the problem with income inequality is that it hasn't gotten worse. People think it has, but it hasn't. We just heard a talk here by Phil Gramm, who was a United States senator and is a very good economist, about a book he's just written called The Myth of American Inequality. And he shows that the government statistics are done poorly and don't include the very large payments we make to poor people, particularly in non-cash form, subsidized housing, subsidized food, that actually mean that inequality in the United States has, since 1947, has somewhat fallen, not risen. On the other hand, there's still a rising inequality in earnings. Okay. What I mean is that educated people, or people who are mainly educated people, earn much more than the non-high school graduate, right? Than they once did. And that's a worry. So what we need to do is improve education.
And what about gender wage inequality?
Well, when I changed gender, I told my dean, I was a professor. I went in and told him what I was doing, and he said, "Oh, thank God, I thought you were going to confess to converting to socialism." Then he said, "I pay you a lot. I can cut your salary 70 cents on the dollar."
70 cents?
He was joking, but that's the old figure.
Yeah.
But it started to convert. It's starting to converge. It's still not all the way there.
It's still
Because of the kinds of occupations that women choose.
Okay.
They choose, for example, to go into caring occupations, being a school teacher or a nurse, or and actually nurses are fairly well paid, but child care, food preparation, and so on, the things that women do is against what men do. They become airline pilots or whatever.
But if you compare like C-levels, executives...
It's much better. It's more equal than it once was. I mean, obviously, it's more equal.
Yeah. Okay, let's turn now to some personal finance questions. If you get $1 million right now, what would you do with them?
I'd spend it on books.
Books?
No, I'm joking.
The $1 million.
In fact, I got a considerable inheritance from my mother, as all three of us did. And that helped a lot to kind of loosen up my it's increased security you get from having a lot of money in the bank. You mean where would I invest or where or what?
Yeah, like...
Where would I spend it on?
Yeah, or invest it.
Well, I wouldn't invest. I'm very old. I'm 80 years old. And, I'm not going to live forever. So I wouldn't worry too much about investing it. If I was 30, I'd invest it in the stock market and leave it there.
Leave it there.
I'd put all of it in the stock market to a diversified portfolio. I would not pick stocks.
Picked up.
I'm not any good at that. I'm an economist, but that doesn't mean I know how to pick stocks. So I would just put it. In fact, I kind of wish I'd done that when I was 30, but I didn't. Still, no, there's an interesting point, though. What would happen to you or to me if at 18 we got an enormous inheritance? $20 million, say, let's make it very big. What would we have done? You wouldn't have worked, either would I. I wouldn't have gone to graduate school and studied economics and passed exams and so on. It's hard work.
Yeah.
It's very corrupting to be rich. So there's a danger as the world becomes richer, our children and grandchildren might become lazy. On the other hand, what's wrong with that? To be an amateur, well, I don't know. I have mixed feelings because to be a professional at something like you or me is very enriching personally.
Yeah,
it's not just the money. It's that you're doing something. You're doing the world's work in a dignified way.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And so I kind of worry about our children, especially our grandchildren, sort of being so rich that they don't need to strive, don't need to work hard to get something, to do great art, or to do great TV, or to do great economics.
That's a very interesting topic. And for the last question, you have lived both sides.
I have.
And what would you see or tell the economic or financial implications of both sides?
I have lived on both sides of lots of things. I was once a socialist.
Okay.
Now I'm a liberal.
Okay.
And once I was a man, and the age 53, I said, well, can I go on with this? No, I guess not. But I was married for 30 years, and a successful marriage, a couple of children. The main thing that surprised me, I was a man, I was an ordinary man. I wasn't feminine. I didn't like colorful clothing. I was just a man, a guy, kind of macho as a professor can be, not that macho. And what surprised me was the quality of female friendship.
Okay.
Men don't quite get the depth of female friendship.
Okay.
Women, two women get together In 15 minutes, they know each other's life.
Okay.
Whereas men can be friends watching football games on TV for 20 years and not ever know how many children the other guy has.
Yeah. That's very interesting. Yeah.
It's a completely
intimacy of different.
And I was quite surprised by that. I didn't know, I hadn't heard about it.
And financially,
well, financially, I didn't change gender to increase my income. That's pretty clear. And I'm not sure I probably lowered it, but I don't care. I was willing to go be a secretary in a farming community if I could be a woman.
If you could be a woman.
It was that strong.
But did you feel like that your income fell?
No, not really. But maybe I didn't get offers from some universities that would have been more prestigious than the ones I was at. But it didn't much matter to my, it changed my work a little bit.
Yeah.
I was more interested in culture and love than most men are, but still, mostly I'm an economist. I'm a quantitative mathematical economist of a conventional sort. But I was going to move anyway towards what I call humanomics.
Okay.
Economics with the humans left in. The philosophy, history, literature, music, art, painting, all that relates to the economy, that I want to include in thinking about the economy. Not just the math and the diagrams and the numbers.
Oh, that's great. One last question. I'm interested in how you change from socialist to liberal.
Well, people always ask that, and I say slowly. When I was 16, I was a socialist. Not a very scholarly one, but, I'd read the Communist Manifesto, and that was enough. But by age 26, the old joke is, if you're not a socialist when you're 16, you have no heart.
Yeah.
If you're still a socialist when you're 26, you have no brain. And I just about made it.
You made this up. No, that's great. Thank you very much for this interview. It's been great.
I've enjoyed it. Thank you, dear.